Welcome, everybody, to the Crossing the Firewall podcast. I'm Tom Holt. I'm a professor in the School of Criminal Justice here at Michigan State University, and I'm the director for the Center for Cybercrime Investigation and Training. And this is a little bit of a different episode. Normally, you're used to us being on sort of the usual podcast format, but this week we actually have a guest with us here in person. So I'll turn it over to my co-host.
I'm Dr. Rachel McNeely. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Criminal Justice and an associate of the Center for Cybercrime Investigation and Training, and a former undergraduate student of our guest today.
And actually, I'm so used to doing this, but we can have you introduce yourself since you're here.
So my name is Dr. Catherine Seigfried-Spellar, and I am a new professor starting here in August in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University.
So tell us about your area of expertise.
Yeah, so my area of expertise is on cyber-deviant behavior, and I have a background in psychology, criminal justice as well, and criminology, so I really like looking at individual differences of how people are more likely to engage in crime online and trying to understand what facilitates that behavior.
Mm-hmm. And what got you into cybercrime to begin with?
Oh gosh, so when I thought I was going to be a police officer when I first was going through school, and my first internship was with the Crime Stoppers at Indianapolis Police Department. And so I think, kind of from working with them, and we had all these tips coming in that were related to child sexual exploitation and abuse. And at that time, this would have been, the early 2000s, dating myself, but there wasn't a lot of research on this, and it was just kind of starting. And so that's really what got me interested in crime online.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it's an area where there are so many assumptions and misconceptions that come up a lot with how people think about child sexual abuse material and kind of this cultural idea of pedophiles, right, and how that all comes together. But it's a topic that you cannot escape when talking to law enforcement about cyber. And I think something we've run into repeatedly is that we can tell them about all these other forms of crime, but CSAM offending is such a huge problem in terms of volume and difficulty that's just a repeated concern for them across the board.
Yeah, even in the early 2000s when I was the intern and I was selecting kind of the newsletters and the tips and that we were going to kind of be writing up, and the majority of them were individuals that had warrants out for them for child sexual exploitation material. And I just remember thinking how interesting that was, that this is somebody who hasn't been arrested for contact offending, or committing crimes physically against a minor, but instead looking at pictures and what that meant. And in the early 2000s, we were so used to doing research with pedophilia, right? That having this kind of less understood behavior where these individuals that maybe don't have pedophilia, haven't been diagnosed with it, never will be diagnosed with it, and yet they're engaging in these crimes that we really just don't understand.
Yeah, and I learned it from you in your course. So I have a soapbox that truly came from taking your course in undergraduate, and I talk about it in our trainings for law enforcement. And I always talk about it in terms of if you had a Venn diagram, right? And one circle is people with a clinical diagnosis of pedophilia, and another circle is engaging in or viewing CSAM. They intersect, but they are not one circle.
Yeah.
And people don't necessarily always like that explanation, right? Yeah. Because one begets the other.
Yeah, it would be easier to just say that they all are the same, right? And instead it's just way more complicated.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people have a hard time grasping it.
Yeah. How does that distinction kind of inform how we can address the problem, really? And defining, we have this clinical diagnosis, but then this behavior.
Yeah, so I think one understanding would be that some of these individuals are clinically going to be more difficult to treat, right? The other subset of individuals that maybe don't have a clinical diagnosis of pedophilia or have something, similar to that might mean then that the facilitators of the crime might be life stressors. Some people choose drugs and alcohol, other people choose online addictions and get into really weird stuff, and that's kind of what the internet has. It's really easy to go online and become addicted to pornography now.
So how did you wind up studying sexual behavior in particular? Is it a result of the internship that you had?
Yeah, so a result of the internship I had, I was always really interested in, again, trying to understand, because I think there's this idea that the things that we're interested in sexually are the things that we also view, right? So, if you are interested in having sex with adults, you view adult pornography, for example. And so I always thought it was quite interesting that you had individuals that were viewing maybe types of pornography or had these fantasies, but yet they never engaged in those fantasies, right? And or they look at the pictures, but they never engage in what those pictures are showing. And to me, that was always quite interesting. But we do it as adults too, right? Like we have adult fantasies that are legal. We watch legal porn, and that may not be something that we end up physically engaging in. So there's got to be a difference between viewing and then versus what we might be actually sexually attracted to or interested in engaging in. And for me, that was such a strange concept. It didn't make any sense, I guess. And so that's really why I wanted to understand it more.
And you study more technical aspects of cybercrime, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So I'm really interested in, particularly from like more of the law enforcement side, so thinking about how them researching or investigating these areas, how it might impact their mental health. But then also looking at from an offender standpoint of how they're using this technology to engage in their deviant behaviors online. So things like what types of apps are they using? Are they targeting kids that use certain apps online? Are they communicating in a way in which they are grooming or tricking these kids to trust them, and how they do that? And do the offenders even realize they're doing it?
Oh,
sorry. I
No, go ahead.
Mark on there. So I know you've done some work too with analyzing chats, right? So law enforcement officers will do undercover chats with suspects, right? People who are suspected of soliciting a contact offense with a child, and analyzing those chats to see indicators of someone who might try and physically interact with a child. So can you talk about what that process kind of looked like?
Yeah, so I should first say that the research that I do is all because of law enforcement, hearing the types of problems they have and trying to understand and improve their investigations. And so those partnerships are key to the work that I do, and I'm incredibly grateful. So some of the things that I look at are, within the constraints of the law, because obviously we have to avoid things like entrapment. So that would be an example of that would be a police officer posting online that says, hey, I want to do X, Y, Z, send me this money and I'll do it. Like they can't entice, right? They can't entrap. You can, they can't be overly sexual in the way in which they communicate as a minor or a decoy online. And so there's certain rules and parameters. So what makes it interesting then is to analyze their chats and see, well, how does a law enforcement officer communicate with an offender versus how a minor, a true victim, communicate with another offender as well. And then can we help improve the law enforcement chat so that they are perceived to be more real? That's one of the things that we do. And then also, can we understand how these victims are responding to the grooming behavior so we can actually create resiliency and build resiliency and help victims identify when they're communicating with somebody who's dangerous and how to, essentially shut that conversation down before it's too late.
Mm-hmm. And on the side of children, to the extent that you can speak to it, I mean, I can't imagine being a parent right now with the digital landscape that's there, and trying to teach your child the signs of how to notice someone who's dangerous, teach them to care, emphasize that if they tell about it, they won't get in trouble themselves. There's all of these different, forces working on children trying to keep safe in those environments. Yeah. So what does it look like educating children of, look out, like strangers on the internet are bad. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I think it comes back to, again, the stranger danger thing. We know as criminologists, right, that's not necessarily the individuals you should be afraid of. It should be people that we know, acquaintances, people that are in our lives. But yeah, the internet then is going to facilitate some of that stranger danger in a lot of ways, or at least it's perceived to be that way. How do you tell kids not to do something because they're just going to do it? And I think that's one of the big things that I always talk with parents about is, you have to have those open communication with your kids so that if something does happen, they go to you and they don't go to somebody else, right? Or they don't keep it a secret. And they need to know that mistakes are made and they're not going to get in trouble. Otherwise, they're just not going to come forth. If you tell a child that they can't have a particular app or they can't use their phone in a certain way, they're just going to use their friend's phone.
Yeah. or they're going to find a way to hide it.
They're going to find a way to
makes it
hide
even
it.
harder.
Yeah, and so you know, we also have to remember too that we did the same thing. So it's just easier for kids to do it now. And I think again, having those. I remember when my parents told me not to do something, of course that's what you did, right? Or, you know, we weren't allowed to watch certain television shows, so you watched them at your friend's house. Or you weren't allowed to play those violent video games, so you played them at your friend's house. And so I think that it's the same kind of old story. And it's just making sure that parents, like you said, have that open communication, which is hard when apps change, tech changes so quickly, and you're asking parents to stay on top of those types of things. It's almost, you know, an impossible problem to have.
It really is.
So
Which is
that's
why I have 2 basset hounds. So,
understandable.
Exactly.
That's something that we talked about with Karen, right, was this idea of being a safe adult for children to come to.
Yep.
I think that's hard. It's hard to teach. It's hard to, I think, put your own fears aside for the sake of your children to be the safe person for them to come to. But it's something that's come up a lot when thinking about sextortion as well, because kids are being coerced into thinking they've done something wrong by sending an image. And so they don't tell anyone that a crime's being committed against them when someone comes and says, I'm going to send this out or do whatever. And so it's that, you know, we have to challenge, I think, the deeply ingrained idea in children that they will be punished for making like sexual mistakes, essentially.
Well, because again, they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and we are, right? Like you're exploring your sexuality and your sexual desires, and you're having these conversations that we had as well. You know, it's just that again, now you're having them with maybe more people, or it's easier. And I think too, because you have that screen, maybe it's a chance for people to be more free and open than what we were. We might have been more afraid to have these conversations even with our friend groups, you know, and might be judged for it. And so I always tell people that the internet's not and I don't think it's an awful place. I don't think it's a place, you know, that you should take away from kids, because I think there's a lot of amazing opportunities there, and especially if you're thinking about marginalized groups, you know, LGBTQ plus, like it's a place where people can go and maybe find other people that are like them, which is great, right? So we don't want to tell people, take away the phone, take away the apps, don't allow your kid to use them, because it's just not reasonable either. And then when they have access to that technology, that's when mistakes are made. And so that's also a big problem too. You can't shelter them, otherwise they're not going to know how to use it properly.
Yeah, and you can't escape it either. It's not like something that's opt in, opt out when you're young and then goes away.
Yeah, and you become 18 and now you know how to use a cell phone and communicate with people online. No, you're going to be on Tinder and Grindr, and you're going to be on these dating apps, and you're going to be meeting people continuously, whether it's on Bumble and it's just for friends. Like, you're still going to have these online, you know, relationships. And so being able to trust that you can translate that to the physical space in a safe way, I think is really important.
Yeah, and the fear of having their devices taken away over and over again is a reason given by children why they didn't report being solicited, someone using images against them. They were afraid that their devices were going to be taken away. So I think, the pro-social aspect and the good things that come from interacting with technology are something that have to be acknowledged in the course of addressing harms as well.
Absolutely.
And it can't be one or the other.
Yeah, because it just can't be one or the other. And also knowing, you know, the terminology for it. So one of my friends, I was talking to her about sexual extortion, and I was telling her about, you know, about 14 to 15-year-old boys, juvenile boys, are the ones that are being targeted right now. And she has a son that age, and so I said, hey, just make sure you have a conversation with him. She brought it up. He eye rolled like every kid does. And then a few days later was like, okay, that did happen a few months ago. He goes, but I thought it was catfishing.
Oh.
He didn't know it was sexual, you know, it was sexual extortion, that it was, you know, exploitation, that it was it's a crime. He just thought it was, catfishing, and that this person had, was trying to get pics. He sent, I don't recommend this, but he downloaded a fake pic off the internet, sent that, pretending it was his.
Not bad.
I know. And then
He
he said he wasn't sure if this was real or not. And so then that's when he found out he was being extorted for money. And then he, you know, shut it down and was like, well, that wasn't really me, you know. And so, but then didn't tell anybody about it. And just said, oh, I was being catfished. Like, that's not catfishing.
Right. That's such an important point too, because as more legislation is coming out, that doesn't do any good if no one knows what sextortion is at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and even like I said, it took a parent having a conversation. It took me telling my friend, I know it sounds crazy, but you need to talk to your son about this because he's on social media. Of course he is. He's 15. He should be.
Yeah.
And, and these are the kind of the pitfalls and dangers to be looking out for.
Yeah, it's almost like alcohol consumption or anything else, where if you don't do it at all and you make it seem like it's this horrible thing, then by the time they finally do it, they're not going to tell you, or it's going to be you drink until you vomit and then you have a terrible day afterward, and it just becomes this whole big snowballing problem, as opposed to, no, this is a thing, this is something that you can do, you have to do it very responsibly, and there's all these conditions around it, but it's something that you can do, and if you're going to do it, please tell us about it and everything else.
Yeah. Well, it's like teaching abstinence, right? Like if you, anything that's an extreme, like you said, whether it's alcohol, and there's researchers that have pushed for an argument of teaching safe sexting. And whenever I bring that up, law enforcement, again, crawl into a hole and die. And they're so mad at me. And because they want to tell all kids, don't do it. You're making CSAM, or child exploitation material. Don't do it. It's wrong. They're going to do it. We did too, right? We just didn't have the same technology, but we flashed people and mooned, buses. And so you did things as well. But it's just, so safe sexting is important. And even that, again, translates to all of us, regardless how old we are. I think making sure adults know how to take photographs, plausible deniability, maybe don't have your tattoos in them or whatever, your face. But just keeping in mind that you hope you can trust this person. You don't know if you can, but you need to do it safely. And so that's for all ages. Yeah.
Yeah, that notion of talking about sexting seems to be the thing that makes everyone really squeamish. And I don't know why. I have kids myself, and I know they don't. It's kind of a mixed bag where at times, yes, we absolutely want to talk about our preferences and everything else, but then when it comes down to the meat and potatoes of it, no, we don't want to talk about that at all. And so, fine, I understand some of that. But yeah, the idea that you're in control of these images and you are the one who's generating them can be somewhat empowering, as opposed to just this approach that somebody's going to take it and it's going to be gone. And instead, well, no, you have some control over it. It's when you give it to somebody, that's when you lose control. I think there's a lot to be said for that. It gives people, it can, in the right hands, give people confidence, or at least an understanding of their role in it, as opposed to just being this passive person who's victimized in every case.
Right,
Well,
exactly.
The way that young people talk about it reminds me of like the nihilism around having your data breached, right? It's going to happen. What can I do about it?
Right.
And I think young
Or
people...
I have nothing to hide.
Right.
So.
I think young people speak the same way about, intimate images. They're like, well, someone else is going to see it at some point. There's nothing to be done about it. It's like, it doesn't have to be that way. And I think, teaching that there are reasonable boundaries that you can place, I think just strengthens things all around, right? When you're interacting with people who might be soliciting things from you that they shouldn't be, right? Or interacting in a consensual relationship. I think that's so important to reinforce. I say as a childless person who does not interact with young people. I've got a lot of high and mighty ideas, but I acknowledge that that's very hard to put into practice, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing like trying to have that conversation and then having it shut down. But then when they're ready to talk about it, you have to be as open and as ready for it as you can. So it is hard. It's not an easy thing to do. It's a fine line to walk.
Absolutely, yeah. But your parents hopefully did it as well, right? When we had the sex talk as a kid, or I grew up on a farm, so my sex talk came a little bit earlier because people kept asking questions about what the cows were doing in the farm field, right? But it's just this idea that we've had to talk about uncomfortable things, and so I think it's important, and even if it now involves a device.
So there's a lot to be done, right, on the side of young people and how to interact, but you've also done a lot of work in identifying people who are engaging in those behaviors in ways that they shouldn't, particularly in identifying like images from solicitors. So can you talk about that as well?
Yeah, so through the research, one of the things we were wanting to do is help and speed up the investigations for law enforcement. And so we thought, well, there's facial algorithms that already exist. So what if we, when these offenders are taking selfies and they're, sending sex to these underage minors, like these victims, well, why can't we run some facial recognition against it? Maybe there's some ways in which we can help speed up this investigation. But we quickly noticed that they're smart. Like, they're not, including their face anymore, or they make sure, if you think about taking a selfie in the mirror, there's always that kind of flash, or their face is covered up. And so we started realizing that traditional forms of what we call biometrics, so being able to identify somebody is not going to work in these types of cases. And so we started looking at things that exist that maybe we don't use very often, which is our hands. And so if you look at your knuckles, there's creases and there's ridges, just like a fingerprint, very detailed. And so we started noticing that they take pictures of their hands a lot. And that goes for anybody. Somebody who's, stealing credit card information, best way to post pictures of your stolen credit cards is to hold the credit card, right? Or if you have guns and you're selling guns online. So just thinking about, different ways in which biometrics can be applied even outside of this world of child sex offending. But yeah, so that's what we've been developing, this technology that analyzes hands, with this idea that if we have a known suspect, that you can then run a comparison between the suspect's hands in the images versus the suspect's hands that maybe you took photographs of when you were interrogating them, for example. Yep, and you have probable cause to do so. Yeah.
So how did you get into that particular area? Because that's so kind of very tech specific and this combination of social science perspectives as well. So how did you come to that kind of work?
Yeah, I always tell people that we have to be lifelong learners. And so, my degrees are in psychology and they're in criminology, definitely not in computer science and biometrics and all the things that I find absolutely terrifying, and algorithms and AI. But, I'm also somebody that I can do a quick Google search, right? And I could do some quick research. And so, we originally had the idea of doing facial recognition, and we had the idea of adding fingerprint, right? Like AFIS. So we know that fingerprints are a great biometric. But again, I wasn't seeing them in the law enforcement cases I was analyzing. So I thought, well, I'm seeing hands though. Surely the top of the hand is a form of biometric. And so I just literally did a quick research, Google search. And when I saw some things come back that said, yes, it's just not used. And it's not new. I think some of the first research came out around 2011. So I called my biometrics person that we were collaborating with and said, hey, I don't know if I'm crazy, but can we do thumb knuckles? Can we do like nail beds and something else? Because that would be actually more beneficial than developing technology that technically would work, but it's never going to be applied, because we're never going to have a case where that face, or once in a blue moon we'll have it, right? Where we'll have a face, for example. And so that's kind of what started it. But again, it all came from seeing what law enforcement sees, from sitting down and looking at the same type of case data that they have. Yeah.
And you started your own research network too, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was at a Eurocrim conference. So the European Criminology Conference is every September-ish, and I had met some colleagues there that were also interested in child exploitation, and we felt like there were other conferences like Eurocrim or the Academy of Forensic Science that just kind of niches, but there wasn't one conference dedicated to trying to understand online child sex offending, and from all these different perspectives, bringing together biometrics, forensics, criminology, psychology, right? And so we created the Child Sexual Abuse Reduction Research Network. We wanted that reduction in there. It's always a goal. And so there's about 100 of us that are all a part of it. And the conference is now going to be on its third year in December. And we get about 50 abstracts every year from all over, Australia, Europe, the US, and we select about 23. And so it's a cool network because it's law enforcement and NGOs and academics. And it's really neat because I think we all sit in the same room too. We try to break down tracks. We felt like people like to stick to biometrics. They like to stick forensics. They don't want to integrate. And then we're realizing that that's the best way this research is going to happen, is if we all work together and start blending our sciences. And so we make everybody sit in the same room, and we all learn about AI, even though it might be hard, right? And we all learn about some of these topics that we're not used to. And it's been incredible. So yeah, we're really looking forward to it. And from that, Tom, it's built like all these other kind of research collaborations and groups that are coming out of it too, which is exciting.
Good. And if you're a practitioner and you want to join, how do they do that?
Oh yeah, so you can always message me. And so we'll make sure that my contact information is out there. And we have a LinkedIn page, and people will post grants or collaboration or just questions. Law enforcement might say, hey, this is an app we can't get into or a problem we're having. Anybody have any, contacts and things. And so it's really a great network and that you can utilize. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that the network of researchers looking at it is relatively small compared to these big, associations, when the problem is so large and there's so much of it coming into law enforcement. So where do you think the imbalance comes from? Like, just it being a distasteful subject?
I think it's socially something that people have a hard time discussing. Even within the academic community. I came from a department of computer information technology. I was the social science black sheep that roamed the hallway, and I think for my colleagues that it was just such a hard topic to talk about, and it is like it's an awful topic, and it's an awful crime, but man, is it so important. Like you said, it's global, it's worldwide, it impacts literally everybody, and people have a hard time discussing it. And so I think that for that reason, it's a topic that is shameful, and people don't want to really kind of touch. I hear people from law enforcement talk about how, when they're in like the homicide unit, that their friends think that they're the coolest. Oh, tell me about that case you worked. But when you're in juvenile crimes or in sex crimes, nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so I also think too that there's that shame within even like the law enforcement community as well. Yeah.
It almost seems like studying it and giving it names, right, and kind of breaking it down into, crime scripts, or it seems like it's lending credence to that behavior. I think people feel like, no, if we're looking at it that closely, that means it's a legitimate thing instead of this disgusting outgrowth that should be, tamped down at any cost. And even when our MSP contact, who contributes to our trainings, he talks about his approach to interviewing people who are suspected of this.
Yes.
And every time he goes through the methods and says, here you want to give him a little bit of leeway, the officers in the audience are always like, ooh, like they don't want to have to do that. They don't want to have to implement the techniques because it feels like they're being kind or
Yes.
being nice to the offender in that situation.
Yeah, my lieutenant's what I always call him. I hope Dave Walker, you're seeing this. But he was the one who was in charge of the Crime Stoppers when I interned there so many years ago, and he was the Indianapolis Police Department's juvenile crimes lieutenant for that unit, and he always said that the thing that you had to do was show that you understood and that kind of relate to them and what the behaviors that they were doing, which he said is very hard for a lot of people to do because it is so awful and disgusting. But he talked about that being a part of, like you said, some of the interrogation tactics, and he was really good at it. But not a lot of people can handle it.
Yeah. He always says, he's like, you can go and wash your mouth out with soap after. I don't care what you have to do, but in the moment, you gotta, act like they're buddy. You gotta act like you see where they're coming from, and they don't like the idea of having to do that at all.
Yeah, well, and it's hard. I've been hired to do some consulting work, for the defense or prosecution. We always say we're not hired guns. We'll work any side and be fair. We'll just tell you what the data says, right? But I have done some defense work and analyzed and some of the cases and met with the offender and did some interviews, and some of the cases are interesting. Like you'll have somebody who is 70 years old, never committed a crime, has no criminal record, but within 2 months of each other, their mom, dad both died, brother got hit by a car, and their business went bankrupt. And you're hearing this person talk about how they just got so depressed, they went online, they got into a rabbit hole of weird pornography, and then it got into illegal pornography, and they got caught by law enforcement. And so how dangerous is that person to these other individuals, right, that are committing hands-on offenses, that have been committing offenses since they were 20, right, and that are they recidivate, right, they keep committing these same offenses. And so it's hard for law enforcement to see that these people could be different, and that some of us, again, choose drugs and alcohol, and other people choose weird stuff online to download. And I don't, and again, do we understand why? I always tell you might remember this, but we talk about human nature is very much curious, right? And that's why we slow down and look at traffic accidents. it's morbid, right?
Yeah.
Like that's why there's some people who, when the news says, oh, there's a beheading video, but we're not going to show it, people will search it.
Yes.
They will go online and try to find it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a little bit of that happens. And how different is that from somebody who, again, is what we would consider to be your traditional offender of that, pedophile, attracted to children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really, it's super, like you said, super interesting, super complicated.
So how do you see something like AI transforming the kind of work that you do?
Making it worse, Tom.
Yeah.
So it's awful, right? So now, not only do we have 36 million tips came last year from NetMIC, right? So now we have all of these tips that are coming in, and now we don't know which ones are real children. We don't know which ones are AI generated, right? Because they look so good. And I remember it was a couple weeks ago, so I'm technically deputized, and I have an affiliation with the high-tech crime unit in Tippecanoe County back at Purdue. And I remember one of my detectives came to me and said, hey, look at these pictures. Do you think they're real? It was the first time where I said, I can't tell. Normally you can tell it's pretty good, but you can tell it's been altered or it's fake, right? It's been ran through an app. But no, I couldn't tell. And he was like, this is where we're at now. He's like, I don't know if this person needs my help today or if this is not real. And, and I think all law enforcement agree that, and, academics are concerned as well, that these types of images are going to potentially facilitate some of the, what I'm doing is not as bad anymore as an offender attitude because it's not real. It's not a real victim. But from the law enforcement side, we can't tell. And also the offender doesn't know that, but they're going to be able to use that as a rationalization or kind of neutralize maybe some of the guilt and worry that they have, right? Yeah, but I think it's scary.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I don't think people realize the degree of complicatedness it introduces when you have all these images swimming around, some of which have been being passed around for like 25 years at this point.
Yeah.
Right? Like old sets of horrific CSAM
Absolutely.
images. But when you have to wade through all of that and identify whether there is an active victim, that's why it's important to be able to differentiate between those things.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine how much more difficult that's made.
And I think too, it also, from a, kind of a Me Too movement as well. You can think about how the he said, she said, or they said kind of concerns that it facilitates when we had, for example, images that were being passed around at one of the high schools. And the victim said that she didn't take it, and she was correct in that. They took a legitimate photo, ran it through an app, made it look like she had sent a sext to this student in high school, and then he shared it, right? Yeah. And so then, unless she was able to prove, right, by showing the original photo, which we needed to find, and how it had been altered, it looks like a legitimate photo that she had sent to this kid. And so again, it's going to facilitate some of that they said, right? And it makes it even more hard than for somebody to step forward and say that a sext was sent and shared or not. I did not send a sext. Who's going to believe them?
Yeah.
You're right, because once again, the burden's on the victim to prove that I didn't actually take that photo and send it, that it was created using technology. But that takes time for law enforcement to do, right? Yeah, so that's just a whole other can of worms that that they're dealing with right now.
I can only imagine. But I have a kind of unrelated but related question that I know Taylor would want me to ask.
Okay.
Because something that's been, I think, of interest, morbid interest lately for some people online is the vigilante groups that are right. So essentially, there are groups of people who will live stream or edit and post on YouTube, typically later. They're essentially, it would be entrapment if a law enforcement officer did it. They're essentially sending messages to suspected child contact offenders saying, meet me here. The person shows up and they say, ha, got you, I'm an adult, I'm calling the police. What is the attitude towards that from officers who have to deal with that?
I don't speak for all law enforcement, but I will say, in my personal opinion, that I think would be pretty supported is that they're not thrilled.
Yeah.
And it's not something that is supported. So first of all, like you said, it's not going to be something that law enforcement can even, or a prosecutor can move forward with because it's entrapment. And the other thing too is that, again, it's like setting up a car accident and then saying, don't look when you drive by, right? So I don't know how, messaging people and having them show up versus it being something that's much more organic. You're literally entrapping people, and that's not allowed, right? But the other thing too is that if the problem is that if that person is legitimately being investigated, maybe from a law enforcement standpoint, now they're going to start changing their behaviors. They're going to start deleting apps, not using them the same way because now they're concerned. And so these vigilante groups, from what I've heard, have actually messed up legitimate investigations that might take months. Right? And that's always a problem too.
Yeah. And I can wrap my head around the motivation of the groups like that, because from the outside, I think people are really frustrated by the perception of red tape and the time it takes for law enforcement to put together cases, and they see it as, well, if I can skip all of the red tape steps as a civilian, I'm making this easier. But there are all those things happening in the background that are required by the system to do anything about it. And it's like the vigilante motivation without any actual vigilante justice after, because it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't work that way. And it's also, like I said, it's really problematic because you're harming actual investigations that are trying to occur. And yes, law enforcement, do have a lot of red tape, rightly so. Like, as civilians, we want to make sure that they're following rules and following laws. We don't want them doing these things, entrapping people, right? Like, that's not what we want. And so I think that that's a good thing that we have. Yes, these investigations take time, but part of that is because, they rely on tips from the general public to come in to say that they've seen things online, or they rely on victims to step forward and say that they've been sexually extorted by somebody. Here's my phone, and you can use the data to try to capture them. Well, guess what? Victims don't want to hand over their phones. I don't want to do that, right? And then even if it is to help a case, or they're embarrassed, right? A 12-year-old's not going to go to a police station and say, hey, here's my phone, you can take everything off of it. Because from what I've seen is that a lot of times they've been doing other things, right? Or they've been sending these texts for a while, and they're just embarrassed and ashamed and been made to feel that way, right? And so of course it's going to take time to investigate these cases. It involves sex, which is something people don't like to talk about.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything that you would want somebody to take away from everything we've talked about? Like, what would be the top line?
Top thing is have those conversations with your kids. So I know that I'm an auntie, and my best friend knows that, as her kids are 10 and 8, so as they get a little bit older, we've started having those conversations. But the one thing I'm really proud of her for doing is that she's helped integrate technology safely in a way that they understand how to use it. So, for example, he has one of those little like kid Apple Watches, I think, or like Gizmo is one of the things. And I'm not promoting any brands or whatever, but anyway, he's got this technology, and it's one of those where he can only message certain people that she has approved. So I'm one of them, and then her and her dad, for example. And he has to take it off at night. It has a charge in the parents' room, like all the things. It has a geofence on it, so when he's at school, he can't use it. But if she finds out that he is, messing around with it at school and the teacher says something, or he's not taking it off to charge it in the parents' room, he has it taken away. He's also paying for the bill of it.
Wow.
Yeah, so just kind of learning a little bit of responsibility, that I think that's really important, that you don't just get a phone and then it's just the whole world is open to you. Like, you should have to understand that there are rules in place, and that if you violate it, then you might lose that technology. But it's also important to have those conversations so that as he gets older, he gets a little bit more responsibility. He understands how to use the technology, and then knows that they'll be there for him if anything ever happens. Or me. It's probably gonna be me. I feel like kids always call their aunt or uncle when they get in trouble. So, but yeah, I would say definitely have those conversations. So, and we'll just stick with our pets.
Well, good. We're so glad that you're a part of the faculty here now. It's great to have you at MSU.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. It's going to be hard to go green, but I'm going to try since I've been a Boilermaker for so long. But I just saw Sparty today.
Really?
Actually, ironically, when I was driving in and everyone was cheering for him, and I was like, oh, am I ready? Like, but it's going to be a great change for sure.
Yeah.
So excited to be here.
Go White will become a natural.
Yeah.
Well, good. We're glad you could join us, and we hope you can join us the next time we cross the firewall. Thanks for listening to the Crossing the Firewall podcast. This is a production of the Center for Cybercrime Investigation and Training in the School of Criminal Justice at Michigan State University, produced by J.J. Thomas. The thoughts and opinions expressed are those of the hosts and the guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the university. If you have a comment or a question about the show, please email us at crossingthefirewall@gmail.com. Also, make sure that you follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn for more information. And if you're enjoying us on your favorite podcast app, please make sure that you like the show and leave us a review so that way everybody knows what we're up to. And if you're listening in on YouTube, make sure that you like us and subscribe so that way you're staying up to date on everything that is crossing the firewall.